week 8 of the fantasy baseball season, and here's a few hitters I would look to add on waivers. The first guy's Kyle Schwarber of the Washington Nationals. So this is the third week in a row here. He's been on the waiver wire list, and this is probably the last chance for managers to go out there and try to get him. He's gone up 10% since last week when I mentioned Schwarber as an ad, and right now he's only available in 42% of fantasy leagues. But right here in his first season with the Washington Nationals, he's off to a pretty Schwarber type of start this year. 8 home runs, 22 RBIs, 18 runs scored, a .234 batting average, which is normal for him usually, and a .333 on base percentage. But over the last couple weeks, since he really returned from that injury and got things kicking into gear, 5 home runs, 13 RBIs, 8 runs scored, a .306 batting average, and a .433 on base percentage. So Schwarber, we know this guy's capable of hitting 30, 35 home runs in a full season when healthy. We know he's going to have a low batting average, but everything else, he's pretty good here in fantasy baseball. And even his strikeouts this season aren't that high, in my opinion, 45 and 137 at bat. So he's cut down a little bit on the strikeouts. And this guy, he's been on a tear over the last week or two. The last few games here for Schwarber: May 19th at the Cubs, 0 for 2. May 20th at the Cubs, 1 for 4 with a homer. May 21st versus Baltimore, 2 for 5 with a run and an RBI. May 22nd versus Baltimore, 2 for 4 with an RBI and a run. And then yesterday versus Baltimore, 1 for 3 with a 2-run homer in that one. So right here, Schwarber, he's hitting the baseball well. And this guy, he's going out there and he's showing his power and he's showing his worth, especially showing up his former team in the last series here for them in Chicago earlier last week. So Schwarber, if you need some power and you need a guy that's still going to have a pretty good on-base percentage, he's definitely worth an ad. And this is probably going to be the last week for him as a recommended ad while his percentage keeps going up to a higher number. The next hitter is Anthony Santana of the Baltimore Orioles. So Santana came off the injured list on Friday. He came off a little earlier than I expected, and right now he's been tearing things up in the first few games back. So far on the season, Santana, only 69 at-bats, 17 hits, 3 home runs, 10 RBIs, 8 runs scored, a .246 batting average, and a .280 on-base percentage. And now since he returned, he's 6 for 13, 1 home run, 2 RBIs, 3 runs scored, a .462 batting average, and a .500 on base. So this guy's been getting on base half the time now since he returned from injury. And this guy, we know what he's capable of. He's got 30 home run potential. Last season, he hit 11 home runs in the shortened season with 153 at-bats. And if you need some power and a guy who's going to get things going for your fantasy lineup, he's definitely worth an ad, available in 48% of fantasy leagues. And now he goes to Minnesota, him and Baltimore, another pretty decent hitters park. And like I said, he's been hitting the baseball and he's capable of hitting 30, 35 home runs. And why not go out there and look to hit him? The next hit is Miguel Sano of the Minnesota Twins. So Sano, he was hitting way under the Mendoza line a few weeks ago. But Sano now, things have definitely clicked for him. And the power's kicked into gear as the weather's got warmer over the last 2 or 3 weeks. And fantasy owners, they ran back to the fantasy wire and picked up Sano. And I even grabbed him in a league as well this week. So on the season here for Sano, 19 of 104, 8 home runs, 18 RBIs, 15 runs scored, an abysmal 183 batting average, and a .315 on base. But over the last 2 weeks, like I said, he's coming out of the slump, and the power's starting to generate. 11 of 42, 6 home runs, 13 RBIs, 8 runs scored, a .262 batting average, and a .340 on base. So right now, he was down in the dumps, sitting in the 140s a couple weeks ago. But right now, the power's coming, and he's hitting the baseball. He's got 2 multiple hit games, Sano, in his last 4, which is obviously a good sign here for him, the Twins, and fantasy owners. In the last few games here for Sano, May 18th versus the White Sox, 3 for 4 with 3 home runs and 4 RBIs, which started this tear for him in the last week. May 19th versus Chicago, 0 for 3. May 20th at the Angels, 2 for 6 with a homer, 4 RBIs, and 2 runs scored. May 21st at Cleveland, 2 for 4 with an RBI. May 22nd at Cleveland, 1 for 5 with a homer. And then yesterday, 0 for 4. So Sano, he's going to have a low average. He'll probably finish the season with a 220, 230 average at best. But he's another guy capable of hitting 30, 35 home runs and he's batting fourth for this Minnesota team, so he's not going to go anywhere, and they're just going to ride him out. And right now, fantasy owners do the same thing they did the last few weeks. You pick him up, see what he does, and if he goes back to doing nothing, you just drop him again and re-pick him up. So he's a recommended add this week here. It's another. Next hit is Danny Santana of the Boston Red Sox. So Danny Santana, the ultimate utility man. And this is what definitely kept him in the major leagues for all these seasons now here is Danny Santana. And especially for fantasy baseball, this guy qualifies at every position except catcher, first, second, third, short, and outfield. So Santana on the season, he just came back off the injured list. So far, 2 for 10 with 2 home runs, 2 RBIs, a stolen base, and 2 runs scored with a 200 batting average and a 333 on base percentage. But in his first 3 games from injury, he's been batting anywhere in the lineup here. May 21st at Philly, he batted first, 1 for 5 with a homer. May 22nd at Philly, then he batted 5th, 1 for 3 with a homer and a stolen base. And then yesterday at Philly, he batted second, 0 for 2. So right here, they're going to use him everywhere, and they're going to move him all along the lineup here is Boston. And they got 2 good utility guys in Marwin Gonzalez and Danny Santana. And a lot of fantasy owners, they ran to the waiver wire, especially with his versatility. And they picked him up in 13% of fantasy leagues already as Santana. And if he keeps producing and playing every day, that number is definitely going to go up each and every week. The next hitter I'll look to add this week's Gary Cooper of the Miami Marlins. So Cooper, we know he's got potential and definitely a power bat, where we saw in the minor leagues throughout his career him have big minor league seasons with the power, but it just hasn't translated much into the major leagues so far throughout his short career. But Cooper, he's been hot, including a walk-off home run the other night versus the New York Mets. And he's been added in 10% of fantasy leagues, but he's still available in a whopping 86% of fantasy leagues is Cooper. So Cooper on the season so far, 33 of 134, 5 home runs, 19 RBIs, 16 runs scored, a 246 batting average, and a 318 on base percentage. But over the last couple weeks, he's been red hot as Cooper, 3 home runs, 9 RBIs, a 385 batting average, 8 runs scored, and a 455 on base. So Cooper, he's getting on base. He's continuing to hit the baseball for this team. And he's got some fantasy versatility as well, qualifying at first base and outfield in the last few games for Cooper. It's been a real hot streak. May 20th at Philly, 2 for 4 with a homer, 3 RBIs, and 2 runs scored. May 21st versus the Mets, 2 for 5 with a homer and 2 RBIs. Then May 22nd versus the Mets, like I mentioned, 3 for 4, including that walk-off 2-run homer. And then yesterday versus the Mets, 1 for 2 with a run. So right now he's batting 6th here in this Miami Marlin offense. And they believe here in Cooper. And like I said, he could play first, he could play the corner outfield. And he's just a guy finding a niche finally here with this team. And he's getting an everyday opportunity, because even last season, in a limited amount of time, we saw him play well, 6 home runs, 20 RBIs with a 283 batting average. So this guy, he's got a pretty good track record. He's got some power, and he's a player that definitely could be added in more fantasy leagues this week. The next hit is Alex Kurloff, top prospect here for the Minnesota Twins. And we saw him just come off the injured list as well. And another guy that qualifies at first and outfield, and he's available in 48% of fantasy leagues. So on the season here for the rookie, 12 of 55, 4 home runs, 14 RBIs, a 218 batting average, and a 241 on base percentage with 11 runs scored. So before he got injured, he was getting things going here with Kurloff, and he came back as well on Friday at Cleveland. So the first 3 games back for him, 2 for 5, 2 runs scored, 2 RBIs on May 21st. May 22nd at Cleveland, 1 for 3 with an RBI. And May 23rd yesterday, 0 for 5 with a run. So obviously, he's that top prospect in the system that just came up this season. And he's one of the top-rated prospects in all of Major League Baseball coming into the season. So he's going to get an opportunity for a struggling Twin team each and every day here. And we'll see what he can do as Kurloff's. And right now, like I said, he's available in 48% of fantasy leagues. And he's definitely worth an add and a guy to be patient with. I know he's only batting 218, but we saw some good potential before he went on the injured list. And now he returned. The next hit is Mike Zamino of the Tampa Bay Rays. So Mike Zamino, he's in a power streak right now, hitting the ball over the fence, it seems like, each and every day. over the last week. And on the season here for Zamino, 21 and 94, 11 home runs already, 21 RBIs, 20 runs scored, a 223 batting average, and a 298 on base percentage. So Zamino, we know he's always going to be a low batting average catcher, but this guy, he could hit for power, and we used to see it with him when he was on the Seattle Mariners. And right now, fantasy owners who need catching help have gone out there and added him in 5% of fantasy leagues. But he's still available in a whopping 67% of fantasy leagues, which is pretty a big number in my opinion for a guy who's a catcher and hitting 11 home runs at a weak fantasy position. So the last few games here for Zamino: May 18th at Baltimore, 2 for 5, 2 home runs, 4 RBIs. May 19th at Baltimore, 0 for 3 with a run. May 20th and May 21st, he didn't play those ball games. And then he returned May 22nd at Toronto, 2 for 4 with a homer. And then he sat out yesterday's game. So right here, Zamino, they're taking it easy with him. And like I said, he's only got 94 at-bats this season, but already 11 home runs for him, which is a big number. So about every 8.2 or 3 at-bats, he's hitting a home run as Zamino. And I don't know if that pace is going to be consistent enough to keep up with. Well, right now, if you need some catching help, there's way worse options I've seen on fantasy teams. And this guy, he's definitely an option and worth an ad this week. The next hit is Jurickson Profar of the San Diego Padres. So Profar, another guy who could play a couple positions in fantasy, but now he only qualifies at second in outfield. He used to be a shortstop as well in fantasy baseball. And so far in the season for Profar, 1 home run, 12 RBIs, 7 stolen bases, 23 runs scored, 260 batting average, and a 350 on base. But right here, his specialty is stealing bases and scoring runs. But over the last couple weeks, that batting average has been a specialty as well, with a 375 batting average and a 423 on base percentage for Profar. So Profar, he was out with an injury in the beginning of May to mid-May, but he returned on May 17th here versus Colorado, 2 for 4 with 2 runs. May 18th versus the Rockies, 1 for 4 with an RBI. May 19th versus the Rockies, 0 for 2 with a stolen base. May 21st versus Seattle, 3 for 5 with 3 runs and an RBI. May 22nd versus Seattle, 2 for 5 with a run and a stolen base. And May 23rd versus Seattle, 1 for 4 with 2 runs. So right here, Profar, he's been a catalyst for this offense the last couple games, where he's been batting second here for this Padre offense, and he's scoring runs and he's stealing bases. So if you need some runs and stolen bases, he's definitely worth an ad, and he's available in a whopping 79% of fantasy leagues. The next hitter is Gavin Lux of the Los Angeles Dodgers. So Lux, one of the top prospects a few seasons ago in all of Major League Baseball. And right here, he was out early in the season with an injury, but Lux, he's returned and he's been pretty decent this season. 3 home runs, 22 RBIs, 14 runs scored, 262 batting average, a 305 on base. But the last couple weeks now, he's really playing at a high level. 3 home runs, 14 RBIs, 8 runs scored, a 364 batting average, and a 417 on base. So if you need some middle infield help, and a guy with total potential and upside like Gavin Lux, you can't go wrong. And I'm only recommending him this week as he's still available only in 35% of fantasy leagues, which isn't much. But right now, he should probably be owned at about 80%. So I'm going to go out there and be aware of him. And as a guy you should add to the last few games here for Lux: May 19th versus Arizona, 1 for 3 with a run. May 20th versus Arizona, 0 for 3. May 21st at San Francisco, 2 for 4. May 22nd at San Francisco, 1 for 4 with a run. And then yesterday at San Francisco, he batted first in that ball game, 2 for 5 with a grand slam in that one. So Lux here, he's driving the baseball. And now this Dodger team, they're going to get a little bit healthier as well, with more protection in the lineup with Cody Bellinger. But right now, Lux, like I said, he's starting to pick things up and get that batting average up. And right now, he's worth an ad here, with him still available in 35% of fantasy leagues. And the final hitter I would look to add on waivers this week is Josh Fuentes of the Colorado Rockies. So Fuentes, he's been on the Rockies a few seasons now, but with a couple off-season deals and some injuries, he's a guy pretty much playing every day for this Rocky team, and he's producing pretty decent numbers so far this season. 4 home runs, 25 RBIs, 18 runs scored, a 269 batting average, and a 283 on base. So the only bad thing here is that on base to batting average ratio, which is pretty much horrible in my opinion. This guy barely draws walks, so it's either a hit or an out for him, and he's going to hurt you in that category. But the last couple weeks here, he's been on a tear. 2 home runs, 15 RBIs, 8 runs scored in 40 at-bats, a 450 batting average, and a 463 on base. So he's hitting the baseball, he's finding the holes, and he's getting things going here. So Coors Field's been friendly here to Josh Fuentes, but now they go to the New York Mets here, is the Rockies, for a 4-game set, and we'll see what he can do over there in Citi Field. And he's available right now for Fuentes still in 67% of fantasy leagues. In the last few games for him, May 18th at San Diego, 2 for 4 with an RBI. May 19th at San Diego, 0 for 3. May 21st, he didn't play that ball game. May 22nd, 2 for 4 versus Arizona with 2 runs. And then yesterday versus Arizona, 2 for 4 with an RBI. So in his last 3 out of 4 games, he's got multiple hit ball games. Here's Fuentes, and he's producing right now for fantasy owners who have added him, and he's producing for this Rocky team. So right now, he's a recommended add for me this week, and that's a few hitters I would look to add on waivers here in Week 8 of the fantasy baseball season.